Hi, I'm Jay with Fable and Fiber, and I talk about books, crafts, and everything from a disabled lens. And if you know anything about me, you know that I am a huge fan of soccer. I have been into soccer for literal decades. For me, being into soccer is almost a form of counterculture. When I was in high school, I didn't really dig a lot of the sports, especially the ones that were available in our local school district and that took a lot of funding. So I would always be very much like anti-football, anti-baseball, anti-anything that was like taking funding away from the arts. But we didn't have a soccer team, so it was easy to be a fan of soccer. I also really got into soccer in a lot of ways because, I had already established myself as a soccer fan because soccer was not cool to be into in Kansas in the early 2000s. So I had already established myself as kind of like that weird soccer fan-ish thing. Not in a lot of ways because I wasn't athletic, so I didn't play. It was more like if everyone else is going to share their favorite football team, mine's going to be Manchester United, not the Kansas City Chiefs, It was more if you had to dress up as a sport for Spirit Day or a favorite team. Like, I wasn't going to pick one of the common ones because why would I? I was that kind of, I guess, annoying in a way. But then we started hosting exchange students, and a lot of them genuinely were into soccer. They came from Europe and had a huge background in supporting teams in La Liga or in Bundesliga or in the Premier League. And so as I was watching and talking to them and seeing like the games that they were watching when they were here, I was starting to actually learn more about a sport that I had kind of just hinged my stuff on because no one else here was watching it in the same way, and I kind of picked it to be annoying. But then it was like I actually started to kind of understand it and kind of like it a little bit. But even then into college, I wasn't super into sports at all until I started realizing that actually soccer was kind of cool. It was kind of different. It was kind of, the pace never stopped moving. For me, there was something so hurry up and wait about American football, where you would do something and then like a down would happen or whatever, and then you'd be waiting through commercial break after commercial break. And so I didn't ever get into it. But when I went to my first soccer game, it was like nothing ever stops. The action is constant. There is no time to sit down. And so growing up, I had been seeing, like, I'd gone to baseball games as a kid, things like that, and it felt like these games stretched hours. But you go to soccer and it's 90 minutes and it never stops and it doesn't go any longer than that. It's just this isolated, like, whoa. And that was kind of my start with soccer. So when I started really becoming more of a fan of soccer and getting into it and everything else, that was really around the time that the very first Ted Lasso advertisements took place. And the Ted Lasso advertisements, I think a lot of people maybe forget that Ted Lasso was initially an advertisement by NBC Sports to announce that they had gotten Premier League games and that you could watch Premier League games on NBC Sports. And the original ads were funny. I remember sending them to my friends in college over Instant Messenger and being like, you have to watch this. This is so funny, and enjoying it and getting a kick out of it because it was the kind of ways that me and my friends would talk to other people when they were saying things about the sport or saying things about soccer, and we'd be like, halves. No, it can end in a tie and things like that. And so it was like one of those almost pretentious sort of humor things that kind of isolated people who weren't in the in group of knowing soccer. But at the same time, I kind of forgot about it for a long time. I kind of didn't think about it until they started filming Ted Lasso. And see, I have another interesting tie to Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is from Kansas City, both the character and the actor. A lot of the places that he mentions in the show, the barbecue restaurants, the teachers that he had in school, those are actual Kansas City locations and Kansas City people. And I also was born and raised in Kansas City. I have my Kansas City 2014 scarf right here that is a co-branded sporting for club and country U.S. men's national team scarf. So for me, it's like Ted Lasso hit close to home because the things that he would say when he was homesick were the things that were home for me. And I just couldn't stop watching. So when I got into watching, it was one of those things of the show just really spoke to me on a core level. And if you've watched the podcast that I host with my friend Alex, Soulfully Alex, called And They Weren't Roommates, I talk a lot about my love for Ted Lasso in some of our episodes, and also my love for other soccer shows like FC Sold Out, because I do like the way that friendship and romance and courage and everything else can be conveyed through a sport that I really love. And as a Kansas Cityan, I can't help but be really excited because the World Cup is going to be hosted, like, we're one of the host cities for 2026. So it's going to be right in my backyard. And Ted Lasso just wrapped filming season 4, the scenes that they're going to do in Kansas City. So it was amazing to hop on social media and see photos and videos of Jason Sudeikis, of Hannah Waddingham and things like that. Like, the people involved in this in places and streets that I've walked down. I did not get to see any of the cast while they were here, but getting to see them in places that I'm so familiar with, that I've been 100 times, is just awesome. So today I want to share the books that I have been reading or am going to read or have already read as part of my love for Ted Lasso. I know that's kind of a long intro, but I feel like I needed to give you that background to understand why I am so on a soccer book kick right now. The first book I have to talk about, I'm still in the middle of reading. It is Believe, the Untold Story Behind Ted Lasso, the show that kicked its way into our hearts, by Jeremy Anger. This is an awesome book so far. The thing I love about it is it contains a lot of different things. So you do have the interviews with the cast where they're discussing whether or not they thought this was going to be a hit, whether they felt good about the things that they were putting out there, the surprising amount of people who auditioned to play Higgins or who wanted to play Higgins. You're going, you would have made the wildest Higgins. And I'm so glad that the person they cast to play Leslie Higgins is Higgins. It also breaks down specific episodes that are perfect for rewatching, especially in advance of season 4, because it talks about the seasons or the episodes that really stood out and what it was like writing those episodes, what it was like in the writer's room, what it was like acting in those episodes, what it was like kind of behind the scenes, and pulls out a very important quote, who the winner of the episode was, who had the best assist. And it really breaks it down in kind of soccer terms, but also in terms of whether or not they thought this was even going to work. And the spoiler is, no, they really didn't think so. Apple TV was relatively unproven at that point, and Ted Lasso was a commercial, and they didn't think it was going to go where it went. So it's a shocker it went that far. All in all, I can't help but share my love for this book and the ways in which it takes the things that you see on screen and breaks them down for you and tells you stories that you never thought could possibly be true about some of these episodes. You don't think about the guy who plays Roy being a relatively soft-spoken and kind man off screen. And you don't think about the kindness and compassion between them or the lessons that we learned, given that this show came out in the wake of the early days of the pandemic. So it came out right when so many of us needed it. And for me, this book really drives that point home in a lot of ways, which makes it something that I'm so excited to finish. And I do think I will rate this book highly, given the way that I've read it so far and the fact that it does seem to continue. Like, at a glance, glancing through it, it is nonfiction, and it seems to continue with the cast interviews, with the episode recaps and things like that, in a way that has that same heart, that has that same passion behind it the whole way through. So this is a winner for me. I am excited to keep reading it, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes reading this and rewatching the episodes in light of the next season coming, because this was released when they didn't know that there would be a 4th season. That hadn't been confirmed. The thing with books around when it comes to reading books like that, I really like reading books that have a good look at the depth behind the media, the cast interviews, the kinds of things that you would actually. So when it comes to books like that, the nonfiction that are behind the scenes, to me, it's almost like an advanced DVD commentary. And I was the person who is devastated for the loss of the DVD commentary. For me, that was a huge part of owning the DVD and owning the physical media, was having that commentary about the media that you were watching and having those extra sneak peeks behind the scenes and things like that. So for me, this is a lot like that. You get that added commentary, you get that added content that you otherwise would have gotten, or you might have heard in the context of the actual show's discussion, but that you might not be able to grasp if you're having to go look up 1,000 different interviews and piece it together. This book does the work for you. And I love anything that's a media deep dive. You know that if you listen to my podcast with my friend Alex at all. We love to dissect media. We love to dive deeper into media. We love to pick apart all the little jokes and references and ties from here to here. And this book talks so in depth about the things that you see in the show that I can't help but believe for the ways that it works with my nerdy little brain that wants all those details. So while we're on nonfiction, in a completely different part of the library, we have the unofficial Ted Lasso cookbook. This one I really am enjoying in that it has a lot of good recipes. I want to kind of go over some of the recipes in it, like the cucumber and cream cheese recipes. It has these salty, sneaky salty bitch bites and things like that. These are awesome. And it does actually tell you the episode that they're referencing for each recipe and give a little description as to why they're including it. So for the goldfish mix, they are referencing season 1, episode 2, and they're talking about not being a goldfish and forgetting to bring the mix. When Ted Lasso kind of has that conversation with Sam Obisanya and says, be a goldfish. Forget what happened. It's okay to lose. It's okay not to remember every single moment of a game and just keep moving forward. It's okay. Be a goldfish, Sam. Those references are in here. Now, I do have a few foundational problems with this book. And the main one, I think the biggest one that I could possibly have, I mean, one of them is that it seems like they're kind of forcing a few things. Like, they have a chess pie in honor of Coach Beard and his love of chess. I feel like they could have picked maybe a different recipe and not just done like something because it has the same name as his favorite game. But I do think a lot of the recipes in here sound great. My problem is when we get to the barbecue. And my big problem with that is that Ted is from Kansas City, as I've said. But the barbecue sauce that they have, if I can find it, which I should just go to the index, but if I can find their recipe for barbecue, I have a problem with it. See, Kansas City has a very specific barbecue culture and has a very specific type of barbecue sauce. Their barbecue sauce has ketchup, apple cider vinegar, packed dark brown sugar, ground mustard, onion powder, garlic powder, ale, and salt. That is not Kansas City barbecue sauce. That is probably closer in my mind to a Memphis barbecue sauce, but it's definitely not a Kansas City sauce. A Kansas City sauce is going to be sweeter. It is going to be tomato based rather than like mustard based or mayonnaise based, but this doesn't have the hallmarks of what I would look for in a Kansas City sauce. So the one thing that they really had to get right in Ted Lasso cookbook is the Kansas City barbecue, and they did not. That's my problem with this book. I do think a lot of the other stuff is great. I do want to try their biscuits because I have heard that the actual biscuits in the show, Hannah Waddingham has said multiple times that in the first 2 seasons, like, the biscuits were so horribly dry and they wanted to give her a spit bucket, and she was like, that's undignified. I'm just going to have to choke it down even though they're terrible biscuits. But what I've heard is they did, one, get better over time, and I would like to also, too, see how they taste in this book. Because I have a suspicion that someone who's making biscuits to taste good versus biscuits to look good on screen is probably going to make a better biscuit. So I'm anxious to try those. That is the number one recipe I want to try in here. I do not think I will be trying the barbecue. The next book I have to talk about is actually a series, which I'm not done with. I am in the middle of. I've got volume 5 here, but this is the manga series Blue Lock. In Blue Lock, you have a set of boys who have these aspirations of becoming part of Japan's national team. The thing is, they are all strikers, and they have a very, very important challenge, and that is to become the best striker in Japan. And that is their only hope of being on the men's national team. If they don't get to be on the Japanese men's national team, they have to quit soccer forever based on the coach Ego who is running the Blue Lock facility. So each of them is on this quest to unlock their special talent in Blue Lock, or find out what it is that makes them an excellent striker, an excellent player, an excellent person, both as a teammate and someone who works within a team, but also pulling out their ego as a striker and realizing that sometimes you just have to make the shot. Sometimes you just have to make the goal. And sometimes that brings out the best in them, and sometimes it brings out the worst in them. Ego is very big on playing mind games and is very big on pushing them past their limits. And it is very, very intense. Some of the volumes actually only take place over half of a game. And so this is very fast paced, and you will want to request several volumes if you are getting it from the library, because it is very, very hard to get to the end of a volume and not have the next one ready and waiting for you. I very much like this series of books. It is much more rooted in actual gameplay than a lot of the other books that I've read or that I'm reading around soccer. So this is very much for someone who has a familiarity with the game more than someone who is like, I just want a fluffy story. This is not fluff. This is not even super fun, but it is fascinating to learn like the way people's different brains work and the way that like they perceive trying to get a goal and things like that. To me, it's very interesting from the perspective of someone who's not athletic, but who has watched a lot of gameplay. I have not started this book yet, but it is called When Grumpy Met Sunshine, and I'm very excited to read it. The idea is that it is essentially a modern Cinderella story. You've got this ex-footballer who is super grumpy and has to sell his memoir, essentially. He is having a difficult time. He knows he's not going to be able to write his own memoir. He kind of gives like Roy Kent vibes in the synopsis, which I'm loving. Roy Kent is my favorite, like easily top 3 favorite characters in Ted Lasso. But then you have this like ghostwriter who comes in named Mabel, and she is a massive sunshine, And she's just like super bubbly and is like, we are going to write your memoir. It's going to be amazing. Everything's wonderful. Well, obviously their business arrangement is a very specific one. Not only do you have people who are working together who have a budding romance, but you also have a Grumpy and Sunshine pairing, which I am so here for. And you've got this ex-soccer player. I know I'm going to like this. I'm a sucker for a good romance like this. I love Grumpy Sunshine. I love this kind of book. And I'm very, very excited to read this one. And I don't think I'll be able to put it down once I start. I did just start the first couple of chapters of this one, The Long Game. And in it, you have basically this woman who has been working at Miami Flames FC, which is a fictional team. I believe this was written before Miami actually got their MLS team, but this is set in like a fictionalized version of the MLS essentially. But you have Adeline, who has been perfecting this routine. She's been like doing everything she's supposed to. She is like the perfect worker. And then one day she just like snaps and goes off on the team mascot, and this goes viral. So her dad, who happens to own the team, decides that instead of firing her, he's going to send her to North Carolina, where she has to like turn around this struggling like local soccer team kind of thing and get them back on track. And it's going to be a whole philanthropy thing to turn her entire image around. And in the town, there is a recently retired goalkeeper who is just kind of this like weird mystery to everyone. And there is a situation with him, but I have not met him yet because I just started reading this book and she has just been told that she has to leave to go to North Carolina. And I'm really, really, really interested in seeing where that goes because something happens with a goat. I know that much and I want to know more. So I'm curious. I have also just barely started this, 1,500 Miles from the Sun. This is a book that I used to own a copy of. And one thing that I did when we were decluttering our home is I took all of our copies, like basically all of the copies I had of books that I hadn't read yet, and I couldn't decide if I was going to read them anytime soon or if they were just going to sit on my TBR forever. If my local library had a copy of that book, I sold it. I took it to Half Price Books. I sold it. I got some cash that I needed to reorganize my space. And I knew that doing that would push me to actually read the books. So now I've made a spreadsheet. Like before I sold them, I typed them all up in a list, made a spreadsheet of everything that I wanted to check out from the library, of books that I previously owned, but had just been sitting on my shelves for years. I mean, I'm not kidding. These were primarily books that I had gotten before I moved out of, I moved like a while ago. And I had gotten these books and just let them sit there, and I had packed them into box after heavy box and moved them with me. And I was just sitting there going, if I ever have to do that again, I'm going to be exhausted. I use the local library as a resource all the time. Why are these just sitting on my shelf not being read? If I had a due date and had to get them back to the library, I would read them. And so I did. I returned all the books. I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I got this. I sold it, and now I've checked it out. It is a book about a very closeted boy who is not really sure of his place in school. He is dealing with cultural situations around his sexuality. He is dealing with emotional situations and friend situations around his sexuality. And he is just not really sure what to do with his future, with his coming out, with his life, anything like that. And in the process of dealing with all of that and sorting through all of that, he meets an online friend and spends a lot of time confiding in this online friend and opening up to him. But I think there are a lot of things, both painful and healing, that happened to him in the course of this book. I'm just not that far into it to know if it's something I'm going to enjoy or not. I generally do like YA, and I actually had a friend recommend this to me who had beta read the book and like had seen a very early version of it. And this is a friend who knows a lot about my taste. And so I do think that it is something I will like if I ever can get myself to sit down and read it. I just haven't had the time. It's been on my TBR forever. And finally, I do have one book that is not a soccer book. It's All's Fair in Love and Field Hockey, but kind of once I get on a kick of books that are like sports romance themed, I'm kind of open to other things. And I did not realize when I picked this up, one of the characters in this is a former soccer player. So you have two girls who are in their senior year. They're both dealing with a lot of stress and change. One of them has recently moved across the country and is now playing field hockey after having played soccer most of her life and is in this boarding school. The other one is dealing with a lot of really intense things because before she was even born, she kind of had her whole plan set out for her. Her mom was going to go pro in field hockey. Her mom had gone to Duke. She'd married the football quarterback. Like, she had everything. And that was the path that Evelyn kind of planned she was going to follow, especially after her mom passed away and said some things that would make her think she needed to take up that torch. So when things go really awry for her, she isn't sure how to deal with that. And she's especially not sure how to deal with it when the goalkeeper she's the goalkeeper, and when the striker of this other team, I guess not the striker, whoever she is, like the forward maybe, goes forward and is like almost to her, and she's sitting there going, obviously she's messing with my head. She has a pretty ribbon in her hair. She has a tattoo that's peeking out on her thigh. Like, she's clearly doing this just to mess with me. Honey, that's the gay panic setting in. Like, let's be real. There are a few things that I did have a problem with. There are some comments by lesbian characters in the story that are kind of making shady comments at bi characters and making biphobic comments, which the biphobic comments get checked, but the fact that lesbian characters are making biphobic comments and no one's really checking the fact that that in some ways is lesbophobic, because it's making all of the lesbians out to be like these super biphobic people, which, yes, that is something that happens from the lesbian community. Like, we do see that sometimes where lesbians will be very biphobic, where they will be like, well, I'll only date a gold star lesbian and things like that. I get that. I get that that is very real. But when it's coming from a bi author, when it's coming from the space of this is everything that every lesbian thinks of us, when it comes from basically every lesbian in the book is having commentary like this, and the biphobia gets checked, but the fact that some of that is lesbophobic doesn't get checked, that's where I have an issue. So I do think that is a problem with this book. And I also do have the opposite of a problem, is that there is a trans side character in this, and the way the trans character is handled is very, very beautiful. He is never dead named. He is never really shown as strange. He did undergo some kind of like transphobia from a family member, but it's something that was discussed and healed from. And I'm really grateful for the way that was handled. I think it was handled with good grace. So for me, this is an excellent book. If you want to see me dive more into what I love about this book, I do actually talk about this in a recent episode of And They Weren't Roommates with Soulfully Alex. So I will link that somewhere on the screen. I don't know where that goes. But yeah, that is my roundup of things that I have been reading or am about to read or have already read because I love Ted Lasso so much right now, and I'm so excited about the World Cup, and I just wanted to share that with you. Have you read any of these? What did you think of them? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Do you like Ted Lasso? Do you hate Ted Lasso? Do you like soccer? Do you avoid anything to do with soccer? Are you not a sports person at all? Have you seen FC Sold Out? It's also good, and I talk about that on a recent episode of the podcast, And They Weren't Roommates. So I definitely urge you to check that out if you have any interest in soccer shows specifically. Let me know in the comments below. Definitely make sure that you like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to hang out with me more and talk about things that are queer and crafty and bookish and are from a disabled lens. Yeah, I hope you just come and hang out with me more. Click the bell if you want to know when I'm around, and I'll see you soon. Bye.